It is now in order to consider Amendment number 9, printed in House Report 111-36. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Madam Chairwoman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 9, printed in House Report number 111-36, offered by Mr. Wittman of Virginia.
Pursuant to House Resolution 235, the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Wittman, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I yield myself as much time as I may consume. I'm honored to represent Virginia's 1st Congressional District, and improving the health of our Chesapeake Bay is a priority to me and to my constituents. And the 1st District has more miles of shoreline than any congressional district in the United States, and the Chesapeake Bay is extraordinarily important to those of us there in that district, as well as other people up and down the basin. And this bill's underlying commitment to improving water quality in our nation's waterways is commendable. And my district in the Chesapeake Bay has significantly benefited from investment in wastewater treatment infrastructure in the past and will so into the future. And I believe that there is a deep sense of frustration in the Chesapeake Bay watershed about the progress we've made to restore the bay. And yes, there have been successes. I don't want to belittle what has been done. However, with all of the federal, state, local, and private partner investment, we would all like to see more accomplishments. You know, our Chesapeake Bay is extraordinarily important. We had heard conversations here about jobs, and certainly the jobs related to building sewage treatment plants and water quality improvements are extraordinarily important. But improving the water quality in the bay also has job ramifications. By increasing water quality, improving water quality, we create a greater realm of natural resources in the bay. And we hear about issues of sustainability in the bay. We hear about oyster populations being at 1% of historical levels. We hear about reduction in crab harvest by 70%. We hear about problems with our finfish populations. Folks, the men and women that make their living off of the water continues to decline. And it is those natural resources that create sustainable jobs. And I would suggest by improving water quality, we also grow jobs, both in the seafood industry and by those that make their living off of the water, whether it's through commercial interest or through leisure and sport interest. These are all extraordinarily important, and those resources, they are directly tied to water quality. And my amendment to this bill is similar to H.R. 1053, the Chesapeake Bay Accountability and Recovery Act. And I've authored this legislation to help clean up the bay because I believe that it is very much a matter of national importance that this national treasure be restored. And my amendment would implement and strengthen management techniques like cross-cut budgeting and adaptive management to ensure that we get more bang for our buck and continue to make progress in bay restoration efforts. Both of these techniques, I believe, will ensure that we're coordinating how restoration dollars are spent and that we make sure everyone understands how individual projects fit into the bigger picture. That bigger picture is making sure that we restore the Chesapeake Bay. And that way we know that we're not duplicating efforts, spending money that we don't need to, or worse, working at cross purposes between agencies both at the federal, state, and local levels. And my amendment would require OMB, in coordination with state and federal agencies involved in the Bay, to report to Congress on the status of Chesapeake Bay restoration activities. My amendment would also require the EPA to develop and implement an adaptive management plan for the Chesapeake Bay and all of the related restoration activities. Adaptive management relies on rigorous scientific monitoring, testing, and evaluation, and also provides for the flexibility to modify management policies and strategies based on changing conditions. And folks, the Chesapeake Bay continues to change, and we should also change along with it in how we manage the restoration activities therein. Cross-cut budgeting and adaptive management should be key components for the complex restoration activities that are occurring presently within the Chesapeake Bay Basin. Madam Chairwoman, I want to thank the Rules Committee for making this amendment in order, and thank Chairman Oberstar and Ranking Member Micah for their consideration. I also ask my colleagues to support my amendment that will help restore the Bay, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman. What purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota
Madam Chair,
rise?
though I do not oppose the amendment, I ask unanimous consent to take the time in opposition.
objection, the time is good. The gentleman can speak for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I support the amendment of the gentleman, and I also want to note that all amendments requested by Republican members of the Rules Committee have been made in order, though not all Democratic requests were made in order. I just want to make that just a little observation to ensure that our committee is being very fair and open and, more importantly, inclusive. The gentleman's amendment is extremely important, as was the offering by the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Crowderville, along with Ms. Markey. The Chesapeake Bay is not just a Virginia, Maryland resource. It is a national and international treasure. It is an estuary. The estuaries of the world are the places where the meeting of freshwater and saltwater create new forms of life. They are resources for the future. They are a window on the past. And the Chesapeake Bay, this perhaps greatest of all estuaries in the world, has been deteriorating at an alarming pace. There was a time when the oysters of Chesapeake Bay turned over that water once every 24 hours. There were millions of oysters. They're down to 1% of their number. Shad are down. Rockfish are coming back. Crabs are down. Why? It's not the watermen who are taking too much, although they're taking more than they probably should be under these deteriorating, declining conditions of fish and shellfish life in the bay. But it's the waters from as far north as New York and Pennsylvania and West Virginia, as well as Maryland and Virginia, that come in the Rappahannock and the Shenandoah and the others that discharge into the bay, along with the Potomac and the Anacostia, that are bringing pollutant loads and toxic materials into the bay that are killing the fish and the shellfish and the life of this bay. I was very pleased when President Obama designated Lisa Jackson to be administrator of EPA, had a conversation with her before her confirmation and after her confirmation. She said, I will make the Chesapeake Bay a priority consideration during my service. And she has already designated a special advisor to deal with the needs of the Chesapeake Bay and the Anacostia River. And I want to assure the gentleman and all of our colleagues that the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure will consider reauthorization of legislation governing the quality of waters of the Chesapeake Bay. But we're going to do this in due course after extensive review and consideration of non-point source pollution. And the recommendations from the OMB, from the gentleman's amendment, will be important in making sure that we take the right policy choices to bring back this bay, to restore this quintessential estuary, and protect future forms of life that can be created in this great meeting place. I thank the gentleman for his amendment, and I urge its support. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to yield to the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Blues.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to associate myself with the Chairman's remarks. I can't say it as eloquently as he did, but I think that we're all very much in agreement that this is a very, very important body of water that needs to be protected. And we appreciate the gentleman from Virginia stepping forward with this amendment, and we certainly will support it. I yield back.
I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you.
The gentleman from Minnesota yields back his time. The gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just would like to thank again the Chairman for his remarks. He is indeed correct. The Chesapeake Bay is a national treasure and an international treasure. It has tremendous economic value, but it also has tremendous cultural value. It is definitely a symbol of not only the eastern part of the United States, but the United States in general. And I don't think any of us have misgivings about wanting it to be back to where it was when Captain John Smith landed here. We certainly would like for it to be there, but are realists and know that it may not get to that point. But I certainly think it's realistic to expect that we can get it back to where it was in the middle part of this century, in the 1950s, which was by far the most productive body of water in the world. It is critical not only economically but culturally to this country, and I do thank the Chairman again and the members of the Rules Committee for consideration of this. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
All time for debate is expired. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Virginia. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is adopted.